Hey guys, it's Presley. We're going to work on wrapping up the last of the noonish notes on the Maritime Empires. Today, hopefully we can get it done in under 10 minutes. I'm going to kind of fly through this, and you'll probably pick up on the fact that I took a few things out, just scratched through them on your end. I'm trying to keep it to the have to knows and not so much the details that won't matter too much on an essay. Okay, so the Dutch are part of this kind of second wave of expansion and imperialism. First, it's Spain and Portugal. Then it's more of the kind of, when we think of Europe, we think of French and British and Dutch. The Dutch Empire is dominated by their trading company, and the Dutch East India Trading Company is one of history's most successful business corporations. In fact, people still use the model of the VOC, and we'll talk about why it's called the VOC today, still. Because they come to dominate the spice trade in the East Indies, and the Dutch East India Trading Company is really kind of like that, like I said, that premier model. So as you can tell from the map, the Dutch colonies, like all of these scenarios, the colonies are bigger than the home country. And these, another example of somebody who has colonies all over the world. So the big thing about the Dutch is at the end of the 16th century, they figured out how to power the first wind-powered sawmill. This is huge. Why is it such a big deal? It makes it so much easier to saw planks and posts. And you need trees in planks and posts to build boats. So wind-powered sawmills produce a major productivity increase. Hand sawing, you could get about 60 beams or trunks in about 120 working days. But with wind power, you can get it in like half a week. This allows the Dutch to produce ships that are faster and cheaper, which is going to give them a major edge in competing with other European countries. So you know how with Europe, sometimes countries kind of go by multiple names? Or what we think of one name for a country, it kind of means something different than we might thought. So like think England. England, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, they're kind of the same place, but not. Each name represents a different thing. And Netherlands versus Holland versus the Dutch is kind of the same thing. In the English language, this is kind of like calling the United Kingdom England by people outside the United Kingdom. Dutch is an adjective form of Holland versus the Netherlands. So when we talk about the Dutch Golden Age, we are talking about roughly the 1600s. Where Dutch trade, science, military, and art are among the best in the world. This is the time of Rembrandt. This is the time of, a few other ones. Jan Veneer, she's another really famous one. But really, the thing to know about Rembrandt is that he is Dutch. He's generally considered a master in three major medias. Visual art is kind of like the biggest one. But what's unique about him versus many other Dutch masters of the 17th century is that he goes for a wide range of style and subject matter, from portraits to landscapes to historical scenes, biblical, mythological. He just kind of tries it all. But he kind of grows during this Dutch Golden Age where Dutch art, although in many ways kind of different than the Baroque style that was dominating Europe at the time, is very innovative and create some new genres. He's also an avid art collector and dealer, which kind of helps build that Dutch Golden Age, because not only people have the money to do art, but they're expanding it as well. The Dutch East India Trading Company, also known, and I'm going to butcher the saying of this, but the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie, the VOC is how it's said in Dutch. It's an early kind of mega corporation. So this is a government-directed conglomerate of several rival Dutch companies in the early 17th century, not 1700s. Originally established as one of those charter companies to trade with India, and eventually it's going to get a 21-year monopoly on the spice trade. They kind of originally were dealing with cotton, silk, salt, tea, opium was kind of their first kind of big deal, but they really just get that monopoly, and that's where they make most of their money. So what's the big deal about a corporation? A lot of these kind of started off as chartered companies, but the difference with the European corporation is that paper certificates as proof of shared ownership. Guys, this is stocks. This is the Dutch are the ones who invent the idea of a stock company, a corporation, which kind of limits your liability because you only own a percentage. And then on to the British Empire. You guys know a lot about the British just because of your own, understanding from a push if you took that, or just American history if you took that before. But so the British Empire at this time is different from the one that happens in the next era. In the next era, the British Empire is going to dominate the world. But at this time, this is where they're kind of starting to grow. They're starting to show up at the big kid table. But a lot of the things that they kind of start during this era are going to be what makes them that large and in charge. The sun never sets in the British Empire that we talk about with period 5. So the British Empire is going to start colonies in all of these eras during period 4. So we talk about the King's Great Matter. This is the first time I've kind of heard it referred to this way, but this is the discussion about Henry VIII and the creation of the Anglican Church. Henry VIII came to the throne because his brother Edward had died only a few months after getting married. And apparently Edward and his wife, who was Spanish princess, she was the daughter of Isabella and Ferdinand, so she's kind of a big deal. She is going to wind up, they're going to petition the Pope so that Henry can marry her and keep that kind of alliance in play. But then after several years, they're only going to have one girl. He starts to be attracted to her lady in waiting. And eventually Henry's going to go through multiple wives. And because he wants to get rid of Catherine and marry her lady in waiting, he's going to petition the church for a divorce. The church, who happens to be really tight with Catherine's, nephew, who's now King of Spain, is going to tell him no. And Henry's not going to like this. He's going to throw a temper tantrum and say, well, then we're leaving the church. And he starts the Anglican Church. So England is going to kind of start this other direction with religion. Interesting to note, Anglican Church Christianity is the only version of Protestantism that happens without a fight. So also big with Europe, and with England in particular, is this concept of mercantilism. We've talked about it a little bit, but I want to go back into it again because this is a big deal. It's a national economic policy that's designed to maximize the exports of the mother country. The idea behind it is you start colonies to get cheap raw goods, raw materials, ship them back to the main country, where finished goods are going to be made and then sold back to the colony. The whole purpose of colonies is to make money. They are not your equal. They don't get to trade with anybody you tell them not to trade with. So you can say, hey, colony, the only person you can buy things from is me. And that's the deal. You know as a colonist that you are getting a fresh start, but it doesn't mean that you get to be an equal. That's going to kind of come back to haunt Great Britain, as you know, in period 5. Trying to think what else with that. We're going to start with there. So this leads to a lot of competition and colonial expansion. So Henry dies without really, he has a son, but his son gets sick and dies within a couple years. So his daughter Elizabeth, the redheaded Elizabeth I, is going to become queen. There's going to be a lot of back and forth fighting because the Spanish do not like the fact they call her the heretic queen. They say that she shouldn't be in charge because, she's a Protestant. Especially after she turned down the King of Spain's offer of marriage. He's very insulted. So he's going to send his armada, his navy, to go take over, invade, get rid of the heretic queen. Well, as the Spanish are coming around the coast of France, a hurricane's going to hit and damage a bunch of their ships. And then they're going to keep going, though. And then when they get to England, those Spanish galleons, those big ocean-friendly voyaging ships, are going to have a hard time maneuvering in the narrow waters of the English Channel. And the English ships are going to be able to completely just kick the butts of the Spanish Armada. And so this kind of a big deal because at this point, England now, they had this heretic queen, and she is able to not only maintain control of her country, but she's going to establish Protestantism kind of as a large and in charge version of Christianity. Part of the reason that the Spanish were sent their armada was because she had these what we called sea dogs. Sea dogs were a friendly name of saying English pirates who would attack Spanish ships and steal the silver. And then Elizabeth would protect them as long as they gave her a cut in the pie. I'm trying to think what else is on here that you need to know about. Sorry. The British East India Trading Company was English and later a British joint stock company. It's formed to trade in the Indian Ocean, originally with Mughal India and the East Indies, Southeast Asia, and later with Qing China. The company is going to end up seizing control over a huge portion of the Indian subcontinent, create a colony there, and really rule India under a charter as the colony of theirs under the name of Great Britain. The British question is going to happen after Elizabeth dies because she never marries because she doesn't want to give up power. And if she had married, her husband would get power. So she never marries, so she dies without any legitimate children. And so her cousin is going to inherit James. James at the time happened to be King of Scotland. So the difference when James peacefully takes over and agrees to take the crown of England, it joins Scotland with England and creates Great Britain as a nation. And from here on out, they're going to stay together. I'm trying to think. You know what a galleon is. You know what the slave trade is. Really pay attention to that Atlantic system, including the slave trade, that whole triangular system in the Atlantic, and specifically that movement of enslaved, captured people from Africa to colonial, kind of the Caribbean area, particularly Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and Brazil for those sugar plantations. All right, so I'm going to stop here because I don't want to make the video too long to make it easy to upload on YouTube. There is a short section left on the French Empire, but let's leave that for tomorrow, and we'll wrap up the notes tomorrow and then move on from there. Gosh, we're cutting down. See you guys on Tuesday.